Hey there everybody, welcome back to Fantasy Inc. My name is Wyeth, and today we're going over Riyria Revelations. I just finished this series and it is truly worth a read, so let's talk about it. Riyria Revelations, written by Michael J. Sullivan, narrated by Tim Gerard Reynolds, was truly one of my favorites for this year so far. I've got to say, a lot of pros about it, a couple cons, but all in all, it is definitely something that should be on y'all's radar. To give a little bit of a preface, this series was initially self-published by Mr. Sullivan with 6 kind of short books. After all the good reviews it received, Orbit, the publishing house, picked it up and combined books 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, 6 to give a little bit more of a substantial read for their readers, and this was a great choice. Finally, before we jump into the summary of the series, if you want a little bit more information on The Theft of Swords, the first book, you should check out my video. Link is in the description as well as right here on the frame, and there you can get the information you're looking for. Jumping into the series as a whole, the setting is fairly similar to other fantasy series you see out there. Based in medieval times, there's kingdoms and some strife between certain kings, but when the series starts out, it's a time of peace. The magic system is kind of vague in the rules and regulations behind it, but that's totally fine. It's not the focus of the series, and only a few characters actually get to utilize it. And our 2 main characters, Hadrian and Royce, are a part of a thieving organization between themselves called Riyria. That is where the series name comes in, Riyria Revelations. Hadrian and Royce are very well-defined protagonists, and you grow to appreciate both of them as 2 sides of the same coin, but one is a little bit more tarnished than the other. Hadrian and Royce, these 2 thieves, definitely have a propensity for finding trouble wherever they're looking, or even if it's just popping up out of nowhere. But their luck does tend to hold on out. On a few occasions, it might not. And that's what really makes this story interesting. With Hadrian, we have the trope of the larger man, the swordsman, and the unbeatable fighter. And with Royce, we have a mysterious assassin turned a little bit more moral due to his entanglements with Hadrian, a much more idealistic gentleman. They run into a plethora of characters in this series, some royals, some commoners, and are able to make fast friends and even quicker enemies. These gentlemen are the best thieves basically in the entire country, and they are tasked with obtaining the hardest to come by objects, or sometimes planting evidence or digging up dirt on people. That may seem like every other thieving book that you may read, but as the series progresses, the tasks that are requested or required of them tend to grow in difficulty and danger, and the stakes that are attributed to said tasks are doing quite the same. Now, this segment of the video, we're going to be doing a pro-con-pro about the series in general. My first pro is definitely going to be the extremely well thought out history that Michael J. Sullivan planned for this planet, for this land, for this book series in general. He put so much detail into the religion, into the history of the past kingdoms, into the different pasts of species, whether that be elf, dwarf, or human, and it is truly amazing. He must have spent weeks, if not years, toying around with this idea of this world in his mind, and it definitely is evident. Michael J. Sullivan is a genius when it comes to building out the history of a world. Moving over to the con that spoke out to me for this series, and it's not a big one, but it does have to do with pacing. Like I said in my first video on The Theft of Swords, which encompasses the original Crown Conspiracy and Avanpartha, the first 2 self-published books by Mr. Sullivan, I thought that the Crown Conspiracy was almost a perfect book, and I do mean that completely candidly. When it came to Avanpartha, it was a little bit slower compared to the first book, and going through the series, that's definitely not a big concern, but there are certain parts when reading it you are kind of looking forward to the beginning of the next scene. Now, I will say for Michael J. Sullivan, he is a master of knowing what needs to happen to really build exposition out. So these scenes are definitely needed, but during certain times of my read through, I was just kind of looking forward to getting back to the action, if you know what I'm talking about. All in all, it still is a wonderful series, but that's something to be mindful of when you pick this thing up. Finally, my last pro is going to be character growth. The characters like Hadrian, Royce, Arista, Ulrich, and a plethora of others were definitely well thought out. When each of them appears, everyone has their own cons and their own baggage that they're dealing with, and a lot of that is rifled through the series as it continues, and we get to understand them as we get these glimpses into their past a little bit more. And as they go on these multiple journeys, multiple adventures, they are coming to grips with their pasts, dealing with the trauma that they definitely came in contact with early on in their lives, and learning how to move forward. The biggest theme in this book is definitely redemption. Almost all of these characters were broken people at one point in their lives previously, or they break during the series, and they have to learn to overcome their mistakes, misdeeds, and learn to become not a different person, but a person who accepts themselves for who they are. So with all that said, if you have not checked this series out, I highly recommend you do. It is definitely worth the read. Now we're going to jump on over to the deep dive, talking about the spoilers for those that read it. So stick with me if you have, and if you haven't, I hope you have an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. What a twist. I have to say, it took me all the way up to the last fight scene to realize that Royce was the heir of Nephron. And I thought I'd guessed it multiple times throughout the series. On book 3, I was kind of thinking it could be him, but I was definitely subverted. So I gotta say, to Mr. Sullivan, you truly kept me on the edge of my seat, and it made complete sense by the end of it. When it came to Hadrian, I honestly thought that he was the heir, and Ezra Harding, Royce, and Arista had mistaken him when they were in the Tower of Avenpartha, and Gaunt was supposed to be the bodyguard. So when it all came back down to it, and these two gentlemen who'd been traveling together for the last decade ended up actually being the guard and the heir, it was a wonderful turn of events and definitely gave a great conclusion to the end of the story. It also came full circle with Arista being the heir of Ezra Harding, how she had gained two very good friends starting out as the employer to these gentlemen, and they got to go on so many adventures together without even knowing that they were the heir, the guard, and the mage of this new kingdom that was going to occur. Speaking of these main characters, let's talk about some of the other ones and how they came full circle with their own hero's journey. I'm going to go back to Myron, and seeing as he was this very reclusive young monk in the abbey that was burnt down and sent into the world with the very, very ignorant eyes of a child almost, and how he has grown into being one of the main scholars of his time and have seen a lot more than anybody else could actually dream of. That was a great character ending. When it came to Magnus the Dwarf, his loathing for the human race, for basically ostracizing his people, and how he was not only brought back to life and forgiven by Arista for killing his father, but also by Royce for forgiving him for betraying them not once but twice, and was going to be a third time, really gave him a second chance on life, and I very much appreciated that. Ulrich, my heart goes out to him. He got a hero's death, and though he didn't rule his country for very long, I think he did the best he could with what he was given. And he and Marvin Pickering finally got to the lost city of Persepolis, which they had dreamed about for years. They got to fulfill that childhood fantasy, so I do think that he got to die a happy young man. When it comes to the antagonists of the series, whether they're the specific characters like the bishops and the archbishops, or even Royce's old teammate, I do think my favorite part was the organization of this false church. It definitely kept the story going, and we got a very succinct reason why this church had searched for the heir for so long, and it ended up being a story of vengeance by the patriarch for being spurned so early in his life, and he has clung on to these last 3 millennium just to fulfill a destiny that he thinks he deserves, and getting it taken from him was a very sweet moment to read, I have to admit. Finally, when it came to Nimbus, the god turned man really did solidify the theme of redemption. He not only realized that Royce was the heir and helped him along the way when he was in prison, but came to the aid of Thress, aka Medina, to help her not only learn to be an empress, but take her out of this very, very dark spiral she was going down. And when he got that feather at the end of the last book, truly made this series well-rounded. Going back to Mr. Sullivan's ability to write a great history, this one scene and the plethora before it with Nimbus's character very much tied off the reason why he had done all that effort into explaining the gods and the past histories to the main characters and to us as readers, and really did make this book series something truly special. I want to hear what y'all thought of it in the comments. Please let me know, because I do think that this is going to be one of my top 3 series I read all year. So if you have any other recommendations like this, also send those my way. I'm happy to check out what my viewers are reading and give my own 2 cents on them, whether you may want me to or not. But again, I really do appreciate everyone's time. I hope y'all have an absolutely wonderful rest of your week, and be sure to keep reading.